to use our live feed link. I'm Jennifer Oman, and on behalf of Informed Consent Action Network, welcome. Today we have Del Bigtree, founder of ICAN. We have Brianne Dresser, who was also the victim injured in the vaccine trial. We have Aaron Siri, the ICAN lead counsel. And today we will be talking about the suppression by former FDA official Dr. Peter Marks of the dangers of the vaccine rollout. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Del Bigtree.
I want to thank everyone from the press. I want to thank everyone watching across America. We think this is a very important issue. Informed Consent Action Network has been dedicated to transparency when it comes to science, especially around the issues of vaccines. Today, we are launching it's now up and live at therealpetermarks.com. It's a timeline over 25 pages, including multiple hours of secretly recorded videos, interactions between vaccine-injured people and Peter Marks, along with all sorts of things in the timeline, what was actually being said in the news, what we were being told in public versus what was known behind the scenes. This is a very, very thorough timeline. We spent a lot of time putting it together. That I think really gives us a perspective of the moment that we sit in right now. As we speak, I think over the last couple of days, Tulsi Gabbard has discussed that she wants to investigate gain of function and the work that Tony Fauci had and what he was involved with there. These vaccines look like, in many ways, they're being developed at the same time that we're developing diseases. It's a question I think we have to look at. And what was the motivation behind the rush of this vaccine? Remember, we had an emergency use authorization, which means we dropped out of the proper safety trials early and essentially turned everyone in America and around the world into a test group. So I think that's what makes these videos so important, is this isn't like some other vaccine where we had a lot of information. We were told that Peter Marks and everyone at the FDA would be very thorough in looking at the post-marketing surveillance that was taking place, since they knew we were taking a risk. When you watch these videos, it's incredible, the amount of gaslighting and really obfuscating answers in truth, and seems to be no concern over the injuries that are being reported. But let's get started. We're just going to put a couple of videos forward today to give you a sense of things you'll find on the timeline, and I'm going to take some of it out of sort of the actual timeline, just to try and show you how you can use this to put thoughts together, where you see in one thing a video that's being said, and then maybe a year later how we're still not getting to the answers. I think it's important to start out with this story, though. This is Maddie de Garay. She was in the vaccine trials. She was essentially paralyzed in a wheelchair and has issues. This is her mother at the Senator Ron Johnson hearings speaking for her.
All three of our kids volunteered and were excited to participate in the trial as a way to help us all return to normal life. My husband works in the medical field, and I have a degree in electrical engineering. We are pro-vaccine and pro-science, which is why we agreed to let Maddie and her two older brothers volunteer for the trial. She developed severe abdominal and chest pain, and the way she described the chest pain, and I quote, "It feels like my heart is being ripped out through my neck." She had to have an NG tube put in to get nutrition. All of these symptoms are still here today. Some days are worse than others. Over the past 5 months, Maddie has been to the ER 9 times and has been hospitalized 3 times for a total of 2 months in the hospital. And Maddie volunteered for the Pfizer trial. Why? Why aren't they researching her to figure out why this happened? So other people don't have to go through this. Instead, they're just saying it's mental. All we want is for Maddie to be seen, heard, and believed, because she has not been. And we want her to get the care she desperately needs so that she can go back to normal. Why is she not back to normal? She was totally fine before this. She did the right thing trying to help everybody else, and they're not helping her. Thanks.
I'm going to turn over to Aaron Siri, who's the attorney for ICAN, also has worked with the de Garay family. I think it's important just to know what was the injury that took place, how did Pfizer report this inside of their own documents, and what did Peter Marks know about this case?
Sure. So yeah, we also represent the de Garay family in addition to representing ICAN. The fact that a product, any medical product, injured somebody is, in and of itself is not a story, because medical products injure people. Otherwise, you wouldn't need to license it. It would just be over the counter, just be food. The reason it's licensed because it can injure some people, and that's why you conduct a clinical trial, to actually assess its safety by comparing a group that gets the product, an exposed group, to an unexposed group that doesn't get the product. Maddie was part of the 12 to 15-year-old clinical trial for Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine. She was one of only 1,000 participants that got the COVID-19 vaccine in that trial. Now, after she was injured, as you saw, she ended up in a wheelchair and had a feeding tube and a whole host of other serious injuries. Now, irrespective of whether or not Pfizer, which it conducts the clinical trial, believed that was causally related to their experimental product, which of course they want to get licensed and make billions of dollars from, they had an obligation, a duty to report it to the FDA as part of the clinical trial. You don't get to leave out injuries from the report you sent to the FDA, even if you don't think it's related. That's not the way a clinical trial works, right? But what happened in Maddie's situation is that when the clinical trial initial reports were published by the FDA and by Pfizer in a peer-reviewed journal, the only serious adverse event that they actually reported was functional abdominal pain. That's what they reported Maddie had. They did not report that Maddie was in a wheelchair. They did not report that Maddie had a feeding tube. So on behalf of the de Garay family, with support for ICAN, we wrote a series of letters to Dr. Peter Marks, the FDA, and we said, hey, Pfizer is not, from what we can see, telling you all the injuries that were suffered by this one participant, only one of 1,000 in the 12 to 15-year-old trial. We wrote letter after letter. The FDA eventually wrote back, and in an incredible letter said, hey, why don't you have Maddie file a VAERS report? Remember, she's a clinical trial participant. She had already actually submitted a VAERS report. We sued the FDA in the Southern District of Ohio to get all the internal emails within FDA with regards to what their communications vis-a-vis Maddie and our letters. What we found was that at some point, Janet Woodcock, who was the acting commissioner of the FDA, did get an email about Maddie de Garay. She then emails Peter Marks and she says, Peter, what's going on with Maddie? And you could see this all in the emails. It's on the timeline, what I'm about to tell you. Everything I've told you, Bishop, is on the timeline. And Peter Marks then asks one of the people that work for him to ask Pfizer. Pfizer then sends back a report. And for the first time, well after they should have reported it, well after they've EUA'd the product, lays out the fact that she ended up in a wheelchair. Yes, she had a feeding tube. But the principal investigator paid by Pfizer says that he doesn't feel that the product was related to her injury. And with that, Peter Mark says, see, nothing to see here. But if you actually look at the underlying medical records, it's clear. I mean, our firm has over 40 folks that just do vaccine-related work. I think we have the largest vaccine practice in the world that I'm aware of that doesn't represent pharmaceutical companies. 15 folks who just do vaccine injury claims. We review those medical records. I don't think it could be any clearer in our perspective, in our legal expert legal opinion, and we have medical professionals in our firm too, that the only thing that could explain her injury and the thing that makes that caused her injury was the COVID-19 vaccine she received in the trial. So you would hope, you would expect that Peter Marks would then go back and say to Pfizer, look, you misrepresented to us what our injuries were, at the least. Even if Peter Marks accepted that the vaccine didn't cause those injuries, which requires, magical thinking, he should have said to Pfizer, you did not comply with your obligation to fully disclose all of the injuries suffered during that trial, and it should have been a commotion. They should have opened every file and see what else was not disclosed. That was only one of 1,000 participants. And so, if you look at this timeline, you could see everything laid out that I just described. The FDA did nothing, just brushed it under the rug at Peter Marks' direction.
I think it's important, too, because you'll see throughout these videos he'll reference many times, well, we don't see this in the data, or we're looking through the data, we're searching the data. The data should be in question the moment that you saw that Pfizer has lied about one of the injuries, one of the important ones. I think that brings into question the data and what you should expect to find there. But let's move on. There's several videos we're hoping to get through. This was in meeting with several luminaries from the NFL alumni, discussing just, concerns for athletes and things like this. I think there's some important things to see here.
Now, what parents really care about is what's the worst thing can happen. And we do know that for males under the age of about 30, there is an increased incidence, it appears, with the vaccines of a rare side effect of an inflammation, mild inflammation of the heart called myocarditis. That's happening in a small number of people, somewhere on the order of, in males, about 1 in 5,000, and it's very mild. Only about 2% have required of that number have actually required any significant medical intervention. Most are just they go to the hospital, they're looked at, observed, given a little bit of ibuprofen, a pain reliever, and they go home, and they seem to be doing just fine in follow-up, as in the studies that we've been looking at. So that's probably the worst I have to say about this. For these mRNA vaccines, there is incredible BS out there about like thousands of people dying, etc. That just ain't true. And in fact, from all of the COVID-19 vaccines, our folks really care about this, and it's very hard to find cases that of deaths that are directly related to these vaccines. There are perhaps a handful, but in general, the number of lives that are being saved is far, far, far greater.
Great, thank you.
I think there's several things to point out there. The fact that he says there may be a handful of people that have died, that they're difficult to find. We're having difficulty finding the deaths, but there may be several, or a handful. I think we pass this off far too lightly. If the United States government is making a product and ensuring that it's safe, and if they go as far as mandated upon the public, which is what President Biden did, that means this statement that a handful of people have died means a handful of people were murdered by the United States government. And at the moment you are making a decision, a greater good decision to say that we are happy murdering perfectly innocent people to achieve some outcome, this is why we need transparency in science. This is why we're demanding a petition be signed that all of the documents involved in vaccines, everything that comes through VAERS, that all of the information be presented to the public. If our government is going to make a decision to kill us, and I want to give this some perspective. We watch these cases of a death row inmate, how hard they fight at top news. Will they be killed? Will they not? Even after they murdered several people, whether it's just or not. What Peter Marks just said is it's okay to murder perhaps an innocent child, a mother of a family, a military person, because that's just the way, And so when he says, we don't know where to find them, I don't think it's very hard. The VAERS system, which is our major capture system, currently has 38,541 reported deaths from just the COVID vaccines. They're there. They're not hard to find. They're there. And so we as the public should demand, if you're going to write off all 38,541 reports, we need to know how you did that. How did you come about saying that none of these could possibly have been caused by the vaccine? And what number is too many? Here's what we have. We need answers on. If it's rare or death is okay, is 38,541 reported deaths, is that okay? If that's how many did die. And I also want to point out that this system was started by Harvard Medical School years ago, and they found in looking at it that it's only capturing less than 1% of the total amount of injuries. I will say there's been multiple studies on VAERS. Not a single one has ever determined that it's over-reporting. It's always said that it's under-reporting. So there's a very good chance that this number is actually less than the total amounts. I want to point out, because the press has joked about this. They'll say, well, VAERS also lists, car accidents, as though, and I think they pointed out 2 or 3 car accidents they found in the VAERS system, which I guess makes it okay to write out of all the other 38,000 deaths that are in there that aren't car accidents. These are the types of things our regulatory agencies and people like Peter Marks allude to, you shouldn't take it seriously because of the car accidents. But I want to point something out. This was a giant publicity stunt. One of the first nurses, I believe it was, to receive the COVID vaccine. After receiving the vaccine on camera, she got up to talk about it. I think this is important.
My name is Tiffany Dover, and I am the manager in CCU. For my team, this has been it's been a hard time. You know, we've persevered through it, but I think that this vaccination offers us hope. Excited to get the vaccine. You know, we are in the COVID unit, so therefore, you know, my team will be getting first chances to get the vaccine. And I know that it's really, I'm sorry, I'm feeling really dizzy. Oh, I'm sorry.
You okay? Yeah. There you go.
The reason I point this out is because I've watched the press joke about the car accidents. Let's be honest, sometime after this took place, obviously this press conference didn't go the way they had expected, but they started delaying people leaving the office after a vaccination to 45 minutes. Why did they do that? Because syncope ended up being a problem, passing out after the vaccine. So I ask you this, if she'd been in a car driving back on a highway or careened right into oncoming traffic and had a car accident, just like she passed out right here, should we not be reporting car accidents directly after vaccination, since it's a known side effect in multiple vaccines, especially like the Gardasil vaccine, lots of girls passing out, car accidents, falling downstairs. So I just want to point out that the media likes to write these things off, but there's reasons why even a car accident should be in VAERS. I think I want to move on, but to point out that VAERS reports are usually, you were just saying to me, you know, who reports to VAERS mostly when we're looking at these numbers?
Historically, VAERS reports, most VAERS reports are submitted by medical professionals, pharmaceutical companies, or health-related organizations, including state public health agencies. And that's what the historical statistics shows, something about 80-something% based on the CDC's own data. Also, submitting a VAERS report is very burdensome. It's not an easy process. They don't make it easy. And I see somebody shaking their head, but that is the case if you've ever tried to submit a VAERS report. And so, you know, my experience has been in working with medical professionals around this issue. Oftentimes, they really only submit a VAERS report if they believe that the vaccine actually caused the injury at hand, based on their professional medical judgment.
I also want to just point out that at the point where Peter Marks stepped away from office, proud of the vaccine that he promoted, we now have 28,908 reported cases of myocarditis and pericarditis. How many kids have swollen hearts, don't even know it, could drop on a football field next year? We don't know. 38,541 deaths, 220,494 hospitalizations right after the vaccination, 156,520 urgent care visits, Bell's palsy in 17,913 people, anaphylaxis in 10,961. Doctor's office visits right around 250,000. If there was a crib, if there was a car seat or anything ever that went on the market that had these kind of numbers, they would be pulled immediately. It's shocking that we still have people celebrating this product. All right, let's move on.
My name is
to the, this is the first, I want to introduce Brianne Dressen, who's also one of the founders of React 19, that has been receiving tens of thousands of people that are also injured by vaccines. This is the first Zoom call she has with Dr. Peter Marks.
What's been going on and what you'd like to see from FDA?
Well, as you can tell, we've got thousands of people that are having issues with the neurological side effects to the COVID vaccines. We're currently involved with research at the NIH, but the research at the NIH has been kind of mired and slowed in the last, I want to say, last couple of months. And that could be, because of the surge of the Delta variant, and everybody, across the country is spread thin. Unfortunately, because we are not able to get any kind of acknowledgement or communication to the medical community that this is happening. We've got a lot of people across the country that are sick and showing up in ERs and medical clinics without any kind of proper acknowledgement or provisions of any sort to help them. Unfortunately, now this is happening to teenagers, and so even just last week I was on a call in the middle of the night with a mom that was crying because she was in the ER with her daughter who couldn't lift her head up, and her throat muscles were paralyzed, and she was having all kinds of problems, and her physicians there were just refusing to look into it at all. Unfortunately, the NIH has told us, the very select few that have been there, that early intervention is something that definitely could help stop the neurological decline that happens after the vaccination reaction ensues. But because the medical community doesn't know that this exists, these people are not being afforded that essential medical care. So for me, it's very black and white that this is an issue.
Brian, I just want to ask you, first of all, Maddie de Garay had issues with digestion, stomach. You're talking about another mother who says her daughter's throat was paralyzed. How, the Pfizer obviously lied about Maddie de Garay, then changed their tune, then said they didn't think it was related. But you've seen thousands and thousands of cases, and tell me a little bit about paresthesia and neuropathy and sort of what you've really been focused on or seeing from this vaccine.
Yeah, we identified in our group at react19.org, it's a registered nonprofit that advocates for people harmed by COVID vaccines. We've found over 36,000 people just in the U.S. that are dealing with these complications. Only 4% of them have reported myocarditis or pericarditis. The vast majority are reporting some type of neurological event. The majority of those are dealing with paresthesias, which is a pins and needles sensation, kind of like when your limb falls asleep and it's numb and it doesn't operate, mechanically correctly, and it's, prickling, burning, stinging. That's paresthesias. Paresthesias is the precursor for neuropathy. Neuropathy is essentially your nerves are dying.
There's several issues that come up through the videos, one being that when someone files a VAERS report of paresthesia, ultimately it's the precursor to a deeper neuropathy and issues that come, and it sort of goes that direction. But there's no system in which VAERS reaches out to see if it's gotten worse. People that have moved now into neuropathy don't know what to do. They already have a VAERS report. So just tell me a little bit about that, the confusion around that, and how VAERS may have paresthesia, but really those people are now suffering something much worse and it's not reported.
Yeah, and this is something else that we've looked at React 19 is we did an audit on the VAERS system with people that have filed VAERS reports, and we found that an incredibly small number of people actually would receive follow-up. The vast majority would not. Their follow-up reports, they would file their first report with paresthesia, syncope, digestion issues, and then they would end up with more issues later on that would need to be filed in subsequent reports. Those subsequent reports are not available for public view. And so the more severe conditions that people are suffering with, they're not available through the VAERS system for people to analyze.
And another issue that you were bringing throughout, like over a year of these calls that you were having with Peter Marks that are part of this timeline, which has just been made completely public. But you're trying to get paresthesia and neuropathy to be listed as an injury from the vaccine by Peter Marks so that the doctors will see that and start treating these people coming in the hospital. If the doctors are told they don't see that this is a possible side effect, they're not treating it as that, right? Isn't that the issue? So what was, and we're going to play a video right now to talk about it, but what was the common problem with people that are reaching out to you when they were going to the hospital with these issues? What were they being told?
It's anxiety. That your entire body is pins and pricks and burning and you can't walk right because of anxiety. But the real issue, and this is what we kept going back to Peter Marks with, was you can't find what you're not looking for. The doctors were not given permission at this point to look for these types of neurological adverse events that were happening in young, healthy people.
All right, so I think there's 2 videos in here you can show, but here again I'm jumping our timeline as you would find it, just because as reporters or anyone that wants to look at this, you can start seeing how over time there's things you can put together in this puzzle that is very disturbing. This is what the FDA should have been doing, but clearly ICAN and React 19 are the only ones that care enough.
We see the faces of these people that are being impacted and can't get medical care because there is a question mark on what the root cause of their neuropathy is. If MIS was at play initially in their disease. And so,
Can you do me a favor? Could you explain to me a little bit more why they can't get medical care? I'm really trying to understand that, because as somebody who's practiced a lot, you always treat the patient in front of you. So I don't understand why they're not. I mean, people should be getting treated for whatever is in front of them, right? So what's happening there? So to put this, very straightforward, a couple of classic cases, which this doesn't happen to just a few. This is very, very common. People are going into ERs and they are being told that they have anxiety. We had someone who very clearly had MIS, and they didn't even run the labs to see if there was MIS in her. And they told her it was anxiety. So her husband took her, scooped her up, and took her to another ER across town. And they ran the appropriate labs, and they found out she had MIS post-vaccine. The other issue that we're having is this is where I really, really need to figure out who in an authoritative position can help us out with this, because this is literally putting people 6 feet under. Whatever the communication was from the medical boards that says, if you talk about misinformation, if you whatever with misinformation, then we're going to review your license. We cannot get medical care. We can't. So we have people that are like sneaking in to these clinics, like my own doctors, So my own doctors, after I've been to the NIH, after I was, diagnosed at the NIH, all of that, right? All of that workup was done. My own doctor's still at home. They're afraid to say COVID vaccine injury or COVID vaccine reaction. They say COVID-related illness until we can actually clear the air with these physicians that are on the front line and tell them it's okay to actually evaluate a patient if they suspect that they've had a vaccine reaction. We're not going to get care. It's almost like it's a dirty word. It's really weird. I'm just surprised that the neurologists aren't treating what they're seeing in front of them, but it sounds like the problem is that they're not getting to the right diagnosis in the first place, and maybe that's what the problem is. I can't tell you how many times I've been called misinformation in the doctor's office. So I wish there was a way that we could figure out how to equalize this before we lose more patients, and just kind of set, some kind of precedent for the medical community that, hey, it's okay to talk to your patient if they've got neuropathy, right? Because at this point, we can't have people dying. We stepped up to do the right thing. We were on the right side of history. We did our part. And we also did our part with reporting to the government, reporting to the drug companies. We did all that. So I guess the one piece I'm still not really confused about for these doctors is, why aren't they treating what's in front of them, right? Because whether or not you would say that something is related to the vaccine or not, they should be treating what they're seeing in front of them, right? Yeah. So they're not doing that. They're just saying, They're afraid.
It's not that they're necessarily not treating what's in front of them, like the myocarditis patients are being treated appropriately. For example, I've been doing a research protocol that I got through the IRB at my own shop, and I pulled a chart the other day. A patient presented 4 days after their second dose of Pfizer, and they're a young male. Got diagnosed with pericarditis, and nobody attributed to the vaccine, and it just wasn't even on their mind. So sometimes, if you don't attribute to the vaccine, it changes how you treat the patient. An example was us with neuropathy. Traditional small fiber neuropathy isn't treated by IVIG, but certain types of immune-mediated, like Sjogren's for example, responds well. Or other viruses are known to do it. Influenza has done it in the past. Those respond to IVIG. So if you don't attribute the right cause, you're not going to give the right treatment. And that's also if you don't know that it's linked, you're going to have a delay in diagnosis. And as I mentioned in the last meeting with shock, it is so rare to have a shock that your treatment is IVIG. And steroids. Steroids in the critical care setting is usually more for lung injury, but just shock chronic dysfunction. So if you don't think about the diagnosis, you don't treat it. And then the risk is that a child can die, which sounds like it might have happened, which is what we suspected in Utah.
We have continued to do our best here to try to understand things. We do continue to carefully monitor safety. And I will tell you that there is nothing that I care about more than making sure that we have safe vaccines. We will continue to do that, and we will continue to look very carefully at safety on these, and we'll continue to work with people to do that.
What I was going to say is that was an AI-generated voice for, was she an ER? What type of doctor was she?
She's a critical care physician, so she spent her time between the ER and the ICU.
Yeah, in the videos you'll see, if you go to the timeline that we've just put at therealpetermarks.com, she'll describe her career, how many injuries she was seeing in her own hospital, which made her start questioning this 1 in a million, or like the numbers that they were saying. I wouldn't be seeing this many right in my own care unit. And then she herself was finally injured and discusses what that's like. But what she's pointing out is critical. If Peter Marks refuses to list this neuropathy as a side effect, potential side effect for this vaccine, no doctor knows to treat it as such. And a neuropathy caused by a vaccine would be treated differently than, as he's saying, why aren't they just treating the neuropathy right in front of them? This is the danger and the recklessness with how this was dealt with. And I just want to ask you, I mean, it seems that we know we jumped out of the emergency use authorization with the EUA. We then vaccinated everyone in the control group, so we'll never have long-term data. They erased that long-term data, which should never have happened. But now you have thousands of people that you're representing. Peter Marks keeps saying, well, I need to go back and compare it to the data or something. But why did he ever just say, can you start bringing some of these people in the NIH so we can study them, look at their records, and see what happened here?
No, and we kept asking him, you know, we've got all these people. Any cases you want for any type of issue, we've got them. And they are eager to be researched. And still they never took us up on that offer.
I think that's a critical issue that you will see as you watch these videos. I mean, I want you to think about the fact that they told us they knew they were going to be very transparent with how they saw the VAERS system, that they were going to be using post-marketing data, they were going to be studying everything. And here you have an individual that's put together a nonprofit to start collecting thousands of people or contacting them with the same injuries. And not one of them was ever investigated by our FDA, CDC, NIH. Nobody cared. We're going to go, and he keeps saying throughout the videos, I'm going to skip a video because we're running out of time where he does this, but he keeps saying, well, now that you're reporting all these thousands, all we can do is go back and look at the data from the trials that Pfizer already showed that they'll manipulate. And so he's looking for search terms. What would the search term be if I was going to find this neuropathy? And asking Brianne, could you give me the search terms that I should be using in order to try and find this issue in the Pfizer data? I mean, it's insane that this is how this works. And we should be really alarmed as citizens that we're being told this was perfectly safe. And you'll see that in the timeline, how many PSAs he's putting out, talking about how safe this is, when behind the scenes he's avoiding meeting with a single injured person. If Maddie de Garay was a one-off and the only one that had a paralyzed stomach and been put in a wheelchair or having neuropathy, okay. But there's thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of them, and that's what makes this so alarming. We don't have time, obviously, to go through the hours and hours of research. I'm going to skip. Aaron, go ahead and speak to this.
One comment on that is that just to point out, React 19 is one group, and it's got over 30,000 seriously injured people from COVID-19 vaccine in it. And when you look at the timeline, just about neurological issues, okay, and if you go and watch each of the videos in which people from React 19 met with Peter Marks, in each one of those, month after month, over the course of over a year, they're saying, can you please look in your databases for neurological issues? We are telling you we're suffering from these conditions. There are calls in which there are multiple doctors who are saying, we suffer neurological issues, right? Trust the doctors. And everyone, Dr. Marks says, and we're looking at it, we're studying it, we're looking at it. And every time they get back in the call, did you look at it? You'll see they never do. He says, no, not yet. We're still looking at it. We're still going to study it. And in the very last call, Mr. Essen says, to him, so did you look at it? He goes, we think that, it doesn't show any harm. She goes, but did you do the study? He goes, I think we did the study. So he doesn't know if he did the study, but he knows the outcome. And you'll hear that in the call, in the last call in the timeline, please.
Here's another doctor that decides to report she is so alarmed that she's not getting any response, whatever. So tell me a little bit about her. She writes a letter, just set this up. This is Dr. Lee.
Oh yeah, Dr. Patricia Lee. She's a critical ER physician once again. And Aaron Siri actually is the individual that helped coordinate the meeting with the FDA because the FDA wouldn't meet with her directly.
Dr. Lee, I mean, we had many, many doctors reach out to our firm about COVID-19 vaccine injuries because we handle vaccine injuries, and not a single one of them was willing to go public in any way until Dr. Patricia Lee, who was an ER doctor. And I'm not talking about doctors who were injured themselves, even doctors contacting us about their patients. She wasn't injured. Her patients were injured, and she was willing and brave enough to send a letter to the FDA. And when they ignored her letter detailing very serious injuries, she just cared about her patients. Then when we sent the legal letter, then they finally met her. Not because it was a patient issue, not because it was a safety issue, but because it was a PR issue.
All right, we'll let her speak for herself.
My name's Patricia Lee. Like I wrote in my letter, I graduated from USC and got my postdoc trainings at Georgetown and Harvard affiliated hospitals. I currently work in the Bay Area, in California, in San Francisco Bay Area. And I'm sure the panel's wondering why a relatively obscure Dr. Lee, who works in the ICU, would decide to write such a public letter. In April of this year, I took care of my first vaccine-injured patient. And then in May, my second. And I recognize them as vaccine-injured patients because they had a very distinct temporal relationship to the vaccine. They were previously healthy, they got vaccinated, and they became ill. Second, I just simply couldn't explain the illness any other way than the vaccine itself. In addition, many times the illness had a very atypical presentation and disease progression. I made sure VAERS reports were filed. In fact, I put my mailing address on the VAERS report, hoping to get a response. And I didn't get a response. I waited and waited and waited. So then, as time went on, my third, fourth, and fifth patients came in. And then in the meantime, one of the original two patients that I recognized as vaccine injured passed away. The patient is in fact a 36-year-old woman who was 22 weeks pregnant at the time of her COVID vaccine. Like I described in the letter, she developed transverse myelitis. She became quadriplegic, blind, and had a tracheostomy placed. And when she was conscious, she would interact with us. She would talk to us, and at times she would cry. The nurses, thinking that she was in pain, would try to reposition her so that she wouldn't be in pain. A lot of times she would say, "No, it's not my body. I have painful thoughts." When the baby was near term, she underwent a C-section. Postpartum, however, she developed hemorrhagic shock. She bled and bled and bled. I was actually on that night and I resuscitated her. I remember that night very, very well. Then, about a month later, when the baby was 1 month old, she, because of her disease activity, she became unconscious again. So the family at that point decided that she just wouldn't want to live like this anymore. That this was not how she would want to live. So they decided to withdraw care. We gave her lots and lots of morphine. We disconnected her from the vent. She died within minutes. The night that she passed away, 2 of my nurses went into nervous breakdown. We actually had to call a psychiatrist in the middle of the night to speak with the nurses so they could stop crying and finish their work. It was around this time that the California Department of Public Health issued a vaccine mandate for all healthcare workers in the state to get vaccinated. Like I said, the 3rd, and 4th, and 5th patients with vaccine injuries started pouring in during this time as well. I felt like I needed to catch your attention, and I knew filing various reports wasn't going to be helpful. So after weighing my options, I decided to write the letter. So now that you've had my letter for more than 3 weeks, I am here to answer any questions that anybody may have. Nobody has questions for me? All right. In that case,
no questions. She's describing multiple cases coming in. How many doctors like her, as Erin, you said, are speaking to you but don't want to speak? She boldly is speaking out. And not a single question about the story that she just told. A pregnant mother ends up getting transverse myelitis, is put on a ventilator to stay alive, and ultimately dies because of that. And why can't, I mean, so many questions should be, why did VAERS not respond? Why is no one responding to a letter? Why does no one seem to care? And right there you can tell they don't care enough to ask a single question. This does not sound like the person that should be analyzing the safety of this product for America and the world right now.
They did care when they got a legal letter because they realized it would be a PR issue, but they didn't care when the doctor was just trying to interact with them on the level of, hey, let's save patients.
I'm going to just jump ahead, and then we can probably get to some questions here in a minute. You can tell over the course of these calls, which is about 6 or 7 total calls that you had, Peter Marsh is starting to get frustrated. I think he'd like this to go away.
This is what happened with the vaccine. This is what happened with the vaccine injured. We had a huge problem after the FOIA release, data release. So obviously you guys know that you have a huge stack of documents that have been mandated or required that you guys have to release them, and you guys are going through and you requested 50 years. So if you can imagine for the vaccine injured, that was like a big kick in the pants for them to hear that the FDA, who approved this vaccine after 5 months of review of the data, is now requesting 50 years to release the data that very well could hold some of the keys to getting them better. And then the other thing is...
I'm going to have to get off, but I will assure you something. I will assure you of, that the having the biologics license application for the Pfizer vaccine or the Moderna vaccine or any other vaccine, that's not going to help here. I can just say that with absolute certainty, because that's not what's that has manufacturing information. It has clinical trial information that will have to be redacted. What really is here is what we're seeing is, and it's what I believe is what we're seeing is what happens with vaccines in the real world. And so we have to look at the data that we have now in front of us, such as the case series that you'll hopefully connect us with, and make sense out of that. That's what we really need to do. We're not trying to stonewall. Believe me, if I could expedite that quickly, there's nothing to hide there. It's just that I'm just telling you that that's a rock that you're looking under, that I think that once, even if we could produce it, and I'd be happy if I could instantly, I don't think that you'd actually find the answer to the problems that are going on.
They kind of did, and that's kind of why I'm wondering if someone could dedicate some time to that one, because in the post-marketing report from Pfizer, it covered the first 2.5 months of real-world data. And so they don't understand it. So what they're seeing is everyone is they found their syndromes in there that they were told for months don't exist. And then they found it there in black and white. And for them, it's been devastating to see their syndromes there in black and white in the Pfizer reports. every one of them are in there. It's very detailed. It's broken down. And the strange thing is the information that Pfizer published. It really mirrors the demographics and the syndromes that we sent to
I'm really
ourselves.
sorry, but I'm gonna have to. I think we have a path forward here. I'm sorry, I do have to go. But I'm not sure that I think we're pretty confident, and you know what, it'll come out in the wash, and you'll see. I don't think there's anything being hidden here in the clinical trials that explain what's going on here.
ICAN brought the lawsuit through Aaron Siri to have the Pfizer data made public, and the FDA fought through the Department of Justice that they needed ultimately 75 years. Go ahead and just very quickly tell me about that case, because he's saying apparently you're not going to find anything in that Pfizer data that matters. And if you watch all of these videos, you'll see how many times he references going back to this data as the place that's going to have all the information. When you finally ask, even in the data, our people are now, because we got it released, because we got the Pfizer data released, they're seeing their injuries listed in there. They're seeing that these things are in there. And the whole time he's like, we don't have any reference to this, right? We're not seeing in our data, but just a little bit about the lawsuits. And we got Moderna and the VSafe data. ICAN has sued and won all of that for the public to make it transparent.
Just generally, it's the typical retort that we encounter all the time, which is, well, post-licensure, the only thing you can do are retrospective epidemiological studies, and those can never prove causation. We have to look at the clinical trial. Okay, let's look at the clinical trial. Oh, no, the clinical trial can't answer the questions. You just heard Dr. Peter Marks say that. So the clinical trial is not good enough. The post-licensure can't prove causation. So how do you ever prove a vaccine causes an injury? This is kind of the shell game they play. But to put Dr. Marks' comments into perspective, the FDA reviewed that data in 108 days. And for better or worse, that is what they relied upon to say that the vaccine is safe and effective. But yet he seems to discount that right then and there. And despite the fact that they could review all that data in 108 days when it was brought in on a rolling basis to say it's safe, and it had to be submitted to the FDA in a de-identified manner, this whole idea that they have to seriously review personally identifiable information for 75 years, which is what they wanted to do, produce us 500 pages per month, is ridiculous. In the federal court, the judge agreed and ordered that the FDA produce it at 55,000 pages per month, not 500 pages per month. Problem is that the FDA misrepresented to the court the total volume of pages. It was they said it was about 450,000. Turns out it was over 1 million. It turns out there's another 1 million we just discovered. So we still actually don't have all the data, and they're still playing a shell game with the federal judge. And if you go and read the court decisions, you can see, I think, that the judge is getting I don't want to speak for her, but I think getting a little tired of the game, and just ordered them to produce that last 1 million pages in a very, very short period of time. So,
Brianne, you said that once that data, was neuropathy, I think, these issues. I mean, by the way, did he ever end up making neuropathy an official side effect?
No, and we brought up the contrast between what's been identified in Europe versus here, and it's two totally different narratives going on.
So Europe is seeing,
We're seeing paresthesias, which, believe it or not, it's monumental for people to be able to identify paresthesias as a side effect.
Yeah. We'll take a few questions if anyone has any questions. We have a few minutes for that. Yes.
Lauren Weber of the Washington Post.
Hi, Lauren.
Did you show Secretary Kennedy any of this material before you published it?
I don't know. Has Secretary Kennedy seen this material? Not to my knowledge. I didn't personally go in and play that for him.
And then you all mentioned VAERS, which HHS recently said they hope to build new systems on. Have you talked to Secretary Kennedy about what those new systems are?
I have not. Anyone else? What?
So I can keep asking.
Sure, if you'd like, if anyone else wants to.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously there's, when somebody has one email with one stakeholder and then has a phone call with a different stakeholder and then another one, until you put them all together and you combine them, you don't get a fulsome picture. And now that the time has passed, and this is quite a large endeavor to gather all these things. React 19 had a whole host of these recordings and communications. Our firm received it from other places. ICAN received some, and so we just combined them all. And when you do that, I don't think Dr. Marks, and I don't think the FDA, I should even say, ever expected that anybody would take all of these disparate communications and put them all together. Because when you do, and you actually see what Dr. Marks was saying on the phone call with Mr. Dressen and all these doctors, and then what he's saying to the media literally like that later that afternoon, that's all on the timeline, you can clearly see how discordant and often contradictory those are. But it takes a little bit of work, and unlike the federal government, these nonprofits don't have billions of dollars and limited resources, and they do what they can with the budgets that they have available to them.
Yeah, in the back.
David Hilsenrath with KFF Health News. What do you hope to accomplish with this presentation? What do you hope results?
Well, I think, first of all we've been fighting for with Informed Consent Action Network is transparency from our regulatory agencies. It's why, as a part of this, we have a petition we're asking every citizen to sign that demands immediately that all VAERS reporting, that all the data be made public, that all the databases that are used to do studies, previously the Vaccine Safety Data Link, should have been made public for years and years. We've been asking for that. We believe every nation in the world should make their data public. You can take, you can make it anonymous, you can take the people's names off of it, but these are records that should be owned by the people. We're a nation of, for, and by the people. The HHS Secretary, HHS, CDC, FDA, they work for us. They're our employees. The fact that we get redacted documents when we ask for them, the fact that we can't check their work and look at the databases and have private scientists run the same data at a time where virtually every single peer-reviewed publication editors have come forward and saying we can't reproduce over 50% of the science being done in here. There's a serious question as to how science is being done, the bias by scientists, and I think what you see here is an FDA, one of the heads of FDA that's certainly in charge of this vaccine program was jumping up and down with pom-poms even in the phase 2 of this trial. He was the one that said Operation Warp Speed. I don't think we want the heads of our regulatory agencies jumping up and down and promising that a brand new technology will make it to the market. What they should be saying is we are going to be critical of it. We are going to use the scientific method. We're going to ask hard questions. We're not going to promise you anything. When you start having regulatory agencies promising a product that isn't even through its safety trials, that they're going to get it out as fast as possible, you now have a biased head of your regulatory agencies, and now America's in danger. And that's what we're showing here, that even after the trials were truncated and cut short, the transparency we're promised doesn't exist. When you have thousands of people lining up saying, hey, we're here, they're not even investigated. This is outrageous. And so I think that Dr. Marks should be brought in on hearings by our government now to get deeper into these issues and ask Secretary Kennedy what we're going to do to make sure that this never happens again, that there's more transparency in this process.
If I could just add to that, I think it's a critical point that our regulatory agencies need to act like regulators. Okay, if we're going to put the stamp of approval of our federal government on a product, because that's what happens, it's a FDA approved, the folks behind the scenes that we pay for as taxpayers should not be acting like industry insiders. They should be acting like actual regulators, and they should view themselves as such. Dr. Peter Marks, if you go on YouTube right now, you will find that after this product was emergency use authorized, but before it was licensed, was putting out videos, Dr. Marks himself, encouraging everybody in America to get this product. How is somebody who, before it was even licensed, telling everybody to get it, going to then not be biased and then say, oh, hey, you know that product I told you all to get? Oops, made a mistake. It's actually not safe and effective. It reflects, the fact that he would even do that reflects that he really sees himself as a partner with industry. And if you read all the internal emails on this timeline, you will see that. He sees himself as a partner in industry, and I think anybody that reads it all will conclude that, rather than as somebody who's standing between industry and the public to make sure this product's as safe as possible.
Question right over here.
Hi, Sarah Overmall from CNN. Sorry if this was already asked. I got here a little late, but what specifically do you want to see happen with COVID-19 vaccines in terms of recommendations and guidance? And what level of communication have you had with the administration about that? And what have you heard from them?
Yeah, Lauren was just asking about that a little bit earlier. Truthfully, we've just got this all together. It's really a Herculean task to put together all of the different timelines, these videos, where they land, what was being said publicly, news reports that were coming out. So now that all of that's together, we will be, I'll send over the link to everyone that wants to see it, including Secretary Kennedy. Obviously, we're very happy with the work that Secretary Kennedy has been doing, looking for transparency. He's trying to put databases together. There's serious questions as to the VSD. Do you want to speak to that at all? I mean, do we know where we're at with that? The database that would have made a lot of this research easier, is it,
Yeah, it would be the Vaccine Safety Data Link, which the Institute of Medicine in 2013 published a report saying that that was looking at the safety of the schedule as a whole. When you read the Institute of Medicine's report, what you'll find is that it said it couldn't identify any study that compared exposed, meaning vaccinated, one or more vaccines, to unexposed, which is the most basic science you do to assess the safety of a product. They couldn't find any studies, and when they brought in their search, they still couldn't find actual underlying support. So the IOM's conclusion is that they couldn't find support that the vaccines are not safe, but obviously it also means they couldn't find support that it is safe. And one of the things the IOM said in 2013 is that kind of comparison can be done in the Vaccine Safety Data Link, which is a CDC paid, a federal government paid for collection of the ICD-910 codes from 11 different HMOs across the country, and where you can actually do vaccine safety studies. But despite the fact that the Institute of Medicine is saying you could do that in 2013, that database, because it's got thousands of completely unvaccinated kids, and the CDC publishing a white paper in 2015 paying $1 million to publish how to do it, it's still never been published. Has it been done? I don't know, but it's never been published. That Vaccine Safety Data Link, that data should be available to the public. We paid for it, and we should be able to do a study. But Sarah, to your question on COVID-19 vaccines, the first thing that should be done is that we've been told now for over 4 years this product is safe. So if it's safe, why do the manufacturers need immunity from liability? PrEP Act immunity should be lifted immediately. That's the first thing that should happen. And the market forces that assure the product of every other product out there, planes, cars, drugs, this computer, every product you see around you, this building, every material in this wall, every one of those products, every product in America, you can sue the manufacturer if it injures you. And because they can be held liable for injuries, that's why those companies conform their own conduct to make sure they don't end up with a loss. They make sure it's safe before they put it in the market and safe as it's in the market. The only consumer product, the only one where you cannot sue for design defect claims in America are vaccines. The product they tell you is safe. So it's time to lift that immunity. And COVID vaccines have double immunity because they've got the PrEP Act immunity, and they also have, as soon as Congress passes an excise tax, they would have immunity under the 1986 Act, the National Childhood Vaccine Introduction of 1986. So that's the first thing we'd like to see. Let market forces actually drive safety as it does with every other product. After all, pharma has made billions of dollars on this product, and if that's not sufficient to pay for the injuries that they say don't happen, that's a problem.
Close to time. I could do another question or two.
Mr. Bigtree, you recently said, let's get these mRNA vaccines off the market, get them out of our kids. Would you elaborate?
Yeah, I think that when we look at the mRNA technology now, we see serious issues. I think that the entire structure of how they're made, I had a great interview with Brett Weinstein on this. If this is a delivery system, if we're encapsulating it in a fatty lipid, which was how we decided to make cancer drugs so that they could cross the blood-brain barrier. That's how this vaccine was designed to transport the mRNA technology. So the idea that it would stay located where the vaccine was delivered made no sense from the beginning. They were using a technology that was designed to cross the blood-brain barrier, meaning this is lodging itself. And now we find it's finding itself into heart muscle. It's finding itself into organs all over the body. body. So it doesn't really matter what it's delivering. A lot of people are pointed to the spike protein being dangerous. I think there's real concerns. We're seeing 700 days after the vaccination now in important studies that there's still spike protein floating around some people's bodies. Serious questions how that's happening. There is a concern that maybe this is inserting itself into the genome, which was one of the original serious concerns of an mRNA technology being used at all. We're seeing contamination of proteins that shouldn't be there being reported that can cause all sorts of issues. But more specifically, this technology itself is designed to deliver a foreign protein into the body. If it delivers that to the heart, it doesn't matter what that protein is. If it's foreign, the immune system is attacking it, and it starts attacking heart muscles, it starts attacking organs. But especially once you've hurt the heart, there's no mending that. That is a scar that is there forever. If you look at prior to all of the gaslighting around how this is a light heart condition, it's actually not. The death rates are very high within the next 10 years of anyone that suffers myocarditis, pericarditis. They're washing over that. But this technology appears to not work the way we want it to. They have no control over it. It's still producing spike protein 700 days later in some people. Has it inserted itself in the genome? It's inserting itself, certainly bringing foreign proteins into places they shouldn't be and causing our immune systems to attack our own bodies. This is a tragic disaster. I think we're seeing rises in cancer that we need to look into. I mean, there is so much. We've seen the death rate. The all-cause mortality didn't go down once we delivered the vaccine. It stayed constant. We're still trying to see, can we get back to the pre-COVID death rates in America and around the world. For all of these reasons, I recognize that Senator Kennedy has to do the science within the regulatory agencies to start showing the public what they've seen, but I think the red flags are there from, I think, thousands of studies now around the world from top universities showing so many different ways that this vaccine is injuring people, and for that reason, ICAN and the work that we do, we're calling for this to pull the recommendation on children right away. We're calling for this mRNA technology to be reinvestigated. Right now, they're upset. They want to say it's safe. They want to start being able to produce more mRNA vaccines, current, new boosters, and run it on the same safety as before. Dr. Marty Makary has come forward and saying he is going to ask for placebo studies, that we're going to actually study each mRNA as it's made right now. That's as it should be. There should be no more put on the market. They shouldn't be allowed to call this total debacle that has taken place and the cover-ups we now see through these videos and through this timeline that we've laid out. We should not be able to reference this horrific experience as a safety trial. It was improper. It is no safety trial there. So therefore, the mRNA is never proven to be safe. It is not safe.
Does Secretary Kennedy share your thinking on that? And does he also believe that the Pfizer and Moderna COVID vaccines should be removed from the market?
I don't know. I can't speak for Secretary Kennedy. I do know what he has said publicly, which is he does believe that the science needs to be looked at very seriously. He says he's looking at it especially for children who have such a low rate of risk for death, 0.00027%, as related to all the world data. That's a zero. And so if you have a rise in myocarditis and pericarditis, which Peter Marks references to the NFL at the very beginning of in the first video, so you only have a risk. The vaccine is only a risk to children. There's no reason to take that risk. They have no risk from the disease. So I think right there it's very easy to make an assessment that this product is not safe enough for children, that it looks like the vaccine is more dangerous than the disease itself. I think we have to look at across the board, though. Pregnant women, where are the studies on pregnant women? Should they be getting it? You hear the horrific story by Dr. Lee. How many pregnant women? We're seeing rises in fertility issues. We're seeing, miscarriage issues. We are admitting now to the fact that there's all sorts of issues with disrupting menstruation in women. These are things that should not be brushed aside. These are things that need to be investigated right away. And we're very happy that Secretary Kennedy is now in position. He seems to be asking the right questions. There's a lot of work to do here. It needs to happen quickly. Every day people are being put at risk by these products.
You shared these views with Secretary Kennedy?
I shared these views with him for the entire 2.5 years that I was his director of communications while he was running for president. It's the reason I took all that time to help him on that mission. I am happy that he's landed as HHS secretary. There's no need for me to continue to communicate with him. Aaron Siri has worked with him. We've brought lawsuits with him on issues on the childhood vaccine program. We have all discussed what needs to happen in there, and we know that he's doing his best to get that done. But he also needs to have the people around him confirmed. He needs his deputy secretary. There's dragging of feet by our government right now that is not getting him the team he needs to get this work done. America voted to have this work done. He should be supported right now.
And if you want to see what Dr. Peter Marks had to say regarding the safety and efficacy for licensing that COVID-19 vaccine for children, we actually formally petitioned the FDA with regards to whether or not the data that existed at the time we submitted a petition, whether or not the data supported that in fact the product was shown to cause more harm than good, or more good than harm, excuse me. And you can read for yourself the petition that was submitted with all the evidence, and then the FDA responded with a fulsome response. And anybody who wants to objectively pull all that and look at that, it's on the FDA docket, right? If you're Pfizer and you want to license a vaccine, how do you do it? You have to petition the FDA. There's a formal docket to do that. And we use that same docket to bring to the FDA's attention the state of the science at that time, and they gave a response. And you can look at both sides in that way. You don't have to take anybody's word for it, and you can make your own.
Just to follow up on the for the FDA specifically. So can you what is the specific ask of the FDA right now? And the second thing is, following up on that, related to licensure of the COVID-19 vaccines, are you suggesting that the FDA needs to reevaluate its licensure of those vaccines for teens, adults, and children?
Go ahead.
I think the FDA is under an obligation to evaluate the licensure of any and all of its products continuously. Right? I mean, the whole idea is that it is putting products out there with the government stamp approval, and it's saying that these are safe and effective to what the FDA standards are. And so if at any point the FDA reaches the conclusion that, in fact, they've made a wrong decision, then yes, they're supposed to reevaluate that. That's true of any product that it licenses.
I would also follow up to say that I would like to see the FDA actually remove this from recommendation. I think that there's enough science around the world, and say it's available to the public, doctors can give it, but the FDA is no longer standing behind the recommendation because there's just too much science around the world showing too many issues. We are going to go into review immediately. I think the FDA needs to do that science. We need to start, doing the studies and see if we can recreate the issues and the studies that are being done around the world. While we're doing that, people shouldn't be being put at risk. The FDA should not be recommending this product. I'd like to see that recommendation withdrawn and not take away from the people. I think that you leave it to the market forces to decide. Doctors should be able to decide whether they still think it's great or not. But immediately, if you're going to protect people, there's just far too many issues now being brought up. I would specifically like to look to the contamination of proteins that are in the product. I would like to see this technology, if it actually is delivering proteins, foreign proteins, to heart tissue and organs around the body. Can that lead to autoimmune attacks from the immune system? I think we have to look at that immediately. And then, is it possible that this has inserted itself in the genome in some people, which means they may be spike protein manufacturing plants the rest of their lives? And then even more alarming would be, if that's true, then what happens if they give birth? We also saw that they didn't want in the trials for anyone to be getting pregnant. They seem to be concerned about this. We've never seen a trial that said to people, please do not have intercourse. If you do, let us know, and we want to track that also. That is a very strange issue to have in a trial. We've never seen that before. Maybe this is what that's about. Maybe it's not. But there is a lot to look at right now. This is a product that is being recommended for the entire world. And all I can say is this. If we continue, whether or not COVID vaccine is as dangerous as I have an opinion on this. I'm still looking for science, and we've read a lot of science. We present it every week on the High Wire, which is our educational program. But if we continue as citizens in America to allow our regulatory agencies to rush products onto the market without long-term safety trials and then recommend those products for the entire world without those safety trials, we are not long for this planet. At any point, we could have a thalidomide situation. We've seen drugs that were believed to be safe that then ended up causing long-term issues down the road. What happens if a vaccine gets on the market that wipes out fertility as we know it? We've seen enough dystopian movies that we should be a little bit sensitive to this point. There's a reason you have safety trials. There's a reason we have randomized controlled trials with double-blind placebos. I will state here, not one of the childhood vaccines on the childhood schedule has ever been through that process. And now suddenly it's alarming that Dr. Maddie de Garay is saying no future vaccine will be made without or will be licensed without a proper randomized controlled placebo trial. What's shocking is that is shocking at all, that we are in the position that we're in now. This has been an absolute a detestable showing by all of mainstream media that has called the things that I'm saying misinformation, said that we were spreading misinformation when we said there was no placebo trials, and now they're admitting in papers that, oh, we know there's no placebo trials, but we don't want to delay the advancement of vaccines. So now they're finally admitting it, and now they're standing, as they have from the beginning, most of them as shills for the pharmaceutical industry. That has to stop. We're in real danger here. We need to be protected from an industry that's caught lying about their products over and over again, spends billions of dollars paying out death and injury cases. There's nothing different with vaccines. This is not made by angels. It's the same pharmaceutical industry that's lied about drugs and gets themselves, whether it's Fen-Phen or Vioxx, same people making vaccines. It is time for this industry to be held accountable. It's time for all of media to hold them accountable, or we are going to be in grave danger. No one wants to see 5-day safety trials with no placebo for any pharmaceutical product in the world. That is not the world we want to live in. It certainly shouldn't be in the products given to our perfectly healthy children.
Hi. On placebo trials, not to keep going back to the point of the dialogue with the administration, but you've talked about this for a long time, and they said recently that they will require that in the future, placebo trials for vaccines. Just once again, since this looks a lot like what you guys have talked about, what dialogue you had with them, what guidance you gave to them on that. And then also you mentioned all mortality data. Just you personally, do you believe that COVID-19 vaccines harmed more people than they helped in this pandemic?
My personal opinion is that these vaccines have harmed more people than they helped. I can say that because nations that had fewer vaccines have a much lower death rate than we do. Africa did better. Nations that really have overall real health issues did better than we did. In fact, we have the most robust vaccine program. We warp speed on the market, and we had the highest death rate from COVID in the world. Someone needs to start asking some important questions. Placebo? Well, look, we're very happy that Dr. Maddie de Garay is now saying that they are going to have placebo trials on future vaccines. I think that's a great step, but it still leaves a serious problem. We are giving about 16 vaccines and 72 or more doses to all of our babies, including a hepatitis B vaccine on day 1 of life. I've personally been called by parents saying they're calling Child Protective Services on me. I'm in the hospital. I just want to leave with my baby. They know I'm hepatitis B negative. Why can't I leave with my baby? I send lawyers to that situation, oftentimes calling Aaron Siri, can you step in here? The fact that a mother, and this came up even in the hearings with Robert Kennedy Jr., and Rand Paul made this very clear point and said, hey, this is a sexually transmitted disease that you only come in contact with when you're sharing heroin needles or sleeping with prostitutes. If a mother is negative, she should be able to not get this vaccine. Yet we are seeing the opposite. We are seeing the force, of this product, threats of taking babies away in hospitals. This has got to stop right away. And when we look at these products, never been safety tested. You cannot say that any of the vaccines in the childhood schedule, scientifically, you can't say they're safe because none of them went through a safety trial, which can only be established against a placebo group. And since that hasn't happened, now you have a real problem. You have an ethical issue because you can't go back and do a placebo trial now that the product's on the market, because they say to deny a product that's already been accepted and approved for people, that you can't do that trial. So we're in a really sticky spot. What we now know is proper safety trials were never done. What we know when you watch this, it's the same thing you see in the childhood program. They just don't do the science at all. They've never looked at the DTaP, for instance, which since the 1986 Act was complained by most parents said they believed either DTaP caused their child's autism because it happened right after that vaccine, and then the MMR. Those are the two #1 complaints. To date, when the Institute of Medicine looked into it, they can't find a single study anywhere in the world looking at does DTaP cause autism. That's horrific. This is a major complaint by millions of parents across the world, and yet no institution has even gone far enough to do a study. We have Dr. Stanley Plotkin on our website, thehighwire.com, under oath in front of Aaron Siri, and he admits to this, that we've never done the study, and he says in that video, Aaron asked him very clearly, so can you say that the DTaP vaccine doesn't cause autism? He says, as a scientist and a logistician, I cannot. But as a pediatrician, I say yes, it does not cause autism. And Aaron says, even when there's no science there to prove it, he says that's right. That is the position we're in. And then he has Catherine Edwards. Both are authors on the Vaccine Bible, Plotkin's Vaccine Bible, and she is on the stand in another case that ICAN has funded, and in front of Aaron Siri admits to multiple vaccines when she's there to say vaccines don't cause autism, but when he asks for the studies on, what, 5 or 6 of the vaccines? Go ahead.
Sure. So I think what Dell's talking about is the CDC claims on its website that vaccines do not cause autism. And so actually we, on behalf of ICAN, we FOIA'd the CDC for the studies that support each one of those vaccines given in the first 6 months of life. DTaP is given 3 times, Hib is given 3 times, meningococcal is given 3 times, IPV is given 3 times, Hep B is given 3 times. So it's 15 shots, 5 different vaccines, first 6 months of life. And when we FOIA'd the CDC for them, they didn't give us any studies. So we sued the CDC in federal court. And finally, the Department of Justice, to represent the CDC, provided a list of 20 studies. But before we signed that stipulated order, I called the DOJ attorney and said, look, you sent me a list of 20 studies, but not one of them involves the vaccines given in the first 6 months of life. They're all for basically MMR vaccine, which is given after the first year of life. So they're comparing kids that got 15 vaccines with 16 vaccines. That's not really telling. That can't show you that vaccines don't cause autism, and not relating to the ones we asked about. Or they're related to Marisol, which have been taken out of vaccines over 20 years ago. And so that was entered into as a stipulation and signed by a federal judge as the list of studies that the CDC relies upon to claim that vaccines don't cause autism. And then later, I in a case involving vaccines and autism, I deposed Dr. Catherine Edwards, who is one of the 4 authors of the medical textbooks on vaccines called Plotkin's Vaccines, and she again reiterated and admitted that there are no studies for those first 4. So when Secretary Kennedy, for example, gets lampooned to say that, well, we haven't properly studied vaccines and autism, I can assure you he's factually correct when he says that. I have a federal court stipulated order signed by a judge. It's on ICAN's website where the CDC admits it doesn't have those studies. Dell was just referring to the Institute of Medicine. Back when the 1986 Act was passed, one of the conditions was only 11 that the Congress asked the HHS to review whether or not they're related to vaccination. One of those pertussis vaccine, and one of them was autism. All the way back in 1986. This is a decade before Wakefield, MMR, any of that stuff. Okay. The HHS commissioned the IOM issued a report in 1991 and said we couldn't find any study, not one, that looked at whether or not DTaP pertussis vaccine causes autism. Fast forward to 2012, where the CDC and HRSA, another agency in HHS, again paid for and commissioned IOM to look at what they said were the most commonly claimed injuries from vaccines. Again, they asked to look at whether pertussis vaccine causes autism, and again, the IOM said they couldn't find any study to support that it doesn't cause autism, but they found one to say that it does. It was Geyer and Geyer study, but they said it's not reliable because it was based on VAERS data. So I think that's the context of what you're referring to in that regard. Now, one other thing is that Mr. Bigtree talked about hepatitis B vaccine. I encourage all the reporters here to just go to the FDA website. There's only 2 vaccines that are licensed to give into a baby on the first day of life: Recambavax HB and Engerix B. Recambavax HB, a product licensed by Merck. Go to the FDA website, pull up the package insert, look at the underlying clinical documents. I implore you, look at them. You will see it was licensed based on a clinical trial that had only 147 children monitored safety for 5 days after review with no control. That sounds incredible, but it's literally on the FDA website. We've even FOIA'd the FDA. We have all the underlying clinical trial reports. Those are on ICAN's website. And for Engerix B, it was 4 days of safety review, 4 days of safety monitoring after injection. And you can go and see that for yourself.
I want to thank everyone for coming today. Obviously, this was about Dr. Peter Marks and the COVID vaccine, and I want to thank Brienne Drest and all the work you're doing with React 19. We stand beside you. We will continue to bring lawsuits or whatever is necessary on the behalf of tens of thousands of people that have clearly been injured but not heard. by our regulatory agencies. As I said today, we are launching at therealpetermarks.com, a full layout of secret recordings, all along with timelines, what was being said in the public by Dr. Marks and what he was hearing behind the scenes. And amazingly, he talks about the data. I got to look at the data. And then at the end, in the last meeting, when you finally bring up the data showing what they're looking for, he says, no, I need to go with real world data. Now suddenly he wants to go. So it's a moving target. Obviously, it shows, as I think Aaron Siri pointed out, that he sees himself in partnership with the pharmaceutical industry. And that is the culture that needs to end inside of our regulatory agencies. We're very excited by the work that Robert Kennedy Jr. Is doing as HHS Secretary, and the incredible team around him, and Dr. Marty Makary, Dr. Mehmet Oz, and Jay Bhattacharya. But they need to move fast, and we believe that bringing pressure is important by the American public. This is a nation of, for, and by the people, which is why we're asking everyone to sign this petition right now. You can click on this QR code. The reporting is starting to shift. We are starting to see this conversation. It is clear that doctors were threatened if they talked about this, which was a huge issue that Brianne brought up. Doctors that want to be able to heal the injury, want to be able to talk about it, want to be able to confer about it, have conferences about it, still find themselves in some reticence that they don't want to be made public. They don't want their license taken away because they're discussing possible vaccine injury. This is something we've seen in the culture of this nation. Guests, they are threatened to talk about it. So we have driven all future science and work around injury underground. We cannot deal with this situation if we're going to continue to vaccinate. There are warnings all over these products, hundreds of warnings, including encephalitis, brain swelling, heart swelling. There has to be a whole industry of doctors that want to work on this. They should be able to proudly say, we work on vaccine injury, we are working on cures. Instead, their licenses are under review. That culture must change immediately, or as I've said, it's just one of the many reasons we are in grave danger now in this country. I want to thank everybody for taking the time today, and continue to watch the work that Informed Consent Action Network is doing, our weekly talk show, thehighwire.com, and Brianne Dressen at React 19. Go to, what's your website?
React19.org.
All right, there you go. We need a lot of help on this issue.
If you have any additional questions, certainly email me. I will get them forwarded to the right people. Additionally, we certainly have some time outside if you came up with a few more to ask.
Thank you.